Ladies and gentlemen, on a post on Facebook where Mr. Raatz and I are having a little disagreement, I posted a 3-part meme with The Rock saying, "Free will has no cause," and then the girl in the back seat says, "Free will is a cause." And he looks around like that. You know the meme. Well, Raatz takes issue with this. He says a mental ontology can easily account for free will via agent causation in exactly this fashion. So he's like, yeah, of course. If mind is the fundamental substance, then all causes must originate from minds. Alright, so I said, well, mind is not the fundamental substance, so back to square one. He says, well, it has to be a fundamental substance. Okay, so I want you to know, ladies and gentlemen, these people exist with us today, like Immanuel Kant is here today. Alright? Johann Raatz says, he says this, and then I put a meme up of Descartes. And my meme of Descartes says, "My senses can be fooled. My mind cannot be fooled." Right? Because your senses are just use logic inside your mind, right? That's Descartes. I'll just think about this. And what did he come to? He came to the only logical conclusion that he was certain that he could be certain of, right? By just thinking in his mind and ignoring his senses, so he thought. E cogito ergo sum, right? Alright, so Johann Raatz is of this school of people who believe the mind is primary and that reality outside of us is superfluous, and not only that, but just like not knowable and secondary. And so what do they think about the senses interacting with reality? He says, that's not very interesting because reality is not really very interesting. What is interesting is when the senses aren't quite correct. That is the interesting thing, right? Now this is interesting to me because we've seen this recently with the little, like this cylinder blocking the two different shades of squares, and they look different but they're the same shade and stuff like this. So people can walk around all day and trust their senses all day and not step in front of buses and not do this and not do that. And then scientists specifically design a little experiment that tricks you into optical illusion in some little way, and everybody says, the senses are destroyed. And he is of that kind. So here's the statement, the quote from him. So I said, "My senses can be fooled, my mind cannot be fooled." That's Descartes. Is this reasonable? He says, as a strict a priori statement, that is reasonable. If we loosen it a bit on the strictness of the a priori nature of that statement, though, then it is no longer reasonable to say that at least 99.999% of the time, it is no longer reasonable to say that at least 99.9%. However, these are different senses in which each of these statements are reasonable, and the former tells us something deductively about the nature of our own minds that is true with 100% certainty. So just thinking and thinking and thinking. You think about thoughts. And you can be 100% certain about that. Statements that are reasonable, and the former tells us something deductively about the nature of our own mind. These are different senses in which each of these statements are reasonable, and the former tells us deductively, with 100% certainty, even if for practical purposes we can trust our senses 99.99. So for practical purposes, our senses are not really reliable, 99.999% of the time. But our logic and our thinking and our mind is 100% reliable if we are deductive about it. It is the coherency of the hypothetical 0.001% that has interesting epistemic consequences, though. End quote. Now that last sentence there really tells us about his view of the situation. It is the coherency of that hypothetical 0.001% that has interesting epistemic consequences. All of reality, all of the evidence for the senses, all the evidence for how reliable they are 99.99% of the time, the only thing that's interesting, the only thing from which they think they can learn anything, is what they see as a glitch in the matrix or a window into the truth. Right? We see it as our senses are fallible. And the fact that they're reliable allows us to know when they are fallible. They say our senses aren't fallible. Our senses are fallible. Our senses aren't infallible. And it blows their noodle. All right. There you go, Raatz. That's what I think of your view that the mind is a fundamental substance. Nonsense on stilts, sir.